Petrushka. The bells were ringing out all over Moscow. A mighty pealing chorus echoed far across the city. It was Shrove Tuesday, the day of the great carnival. Admiralty Square was packed with people, and there were entertainers everywhere, strong men lifting massive barbells, bareback riders on nimble little ponies, sword swallowers and fire eaters, jugglers and dancers. Most popular of all was a brightly coloured tent where a showman was introducing his puppet show. The show you're about to witness, ladies and gentlemen, is a spectacle unmatched in all the Russias, declared the showman, his black eyes glinting beneath his fur hat. The puppets you will see today are quite unlike any you have ever seen. They will come alive before your very eyes. With a flourish, the showman flicked aside the curtain to reveal 3 magnificent puppets: the Moor, a dashing Moroccan prince, the princess, a delicate ballerina, and Petrushka, a wicked-looking sailor. "They're not alive!" came a hoarse shout from the back of the crowd, where a fat merchant was winking at 2 gypsy girls. "Tell us another one, eh?" But with a withering glance, the showman pulled from his deep pocket a tiny silver flute and touched each puppet in turn upon the shoulder. Instantly, they sprang to their feet, and as the showman played a lively tune, they danced and twisted about on the little stage. At the end of the dance, the crowd cheered with delight, and with a loud guffaw, the merchant threw a pile of ruble notes high into the air. The gypsy girls jumped to catch them, but the showman silenced everyone with a long, low note from the flute. The puppets stood as if bewitched. Then the showman began playing a slow, mysterious tune, and the Moor stood proudly at one side of the stage, his hands on his hips. The princess stood in the center, smiling radiantly, and Petrushka fell to his knees, as if pleading with her. "The ugly sailor Petrushka loves the princess," said the showman, "but she rejects him." The ballerina turned to the Moor and took his arm. They strolled together at the edge of the stage, looking deep into each other's eyes. Then Petrushka, snarling like a tiger, pulled out a cudgel and ran across the stage. He tried to attack his rival, but the Moor bravely stepped in front of the princess and knocked the cudgel from the sailor's hand. Petrushka crawled back across the stage, then turned and begged for mercy. But the ballerina took the Moor's arm and walked with him to the center of the stage. Ignoring poor Petrushka, they hugged each other and bowed deeply to the crowd. "More wonderful, wonderful!" "Thus the Moor marries the princess, and the sailor becomes their servant," boomed the showman, and he swept the curtain back across the stage. "The last show will be at 4 o'clock. Then he walked through the crowd, collecting coins in his fur hat. The showman sat down on a bench behind the theater and counted his money. It had been a good day, all right. 5 shows already, and plenty of coins in the hat. He gave a deep, throaty chuckle and closed his eyes for a nap. But behind the curtain, in their dressing rooms, the puppets were stirring. Petrushka, the ugly sailor, was in tears. "How I hate that showman," he cried. "Why did he make me so ugly and the princess so beautiful? If only I was handsome, like the Moor, or I could dance like him. Then perhaps she might love me instead." He jerked to his feet and took a few awkward steps towards the stage. "I must learn to dance, I must. Then I will kill the Moor and marry the princess." At that moment, Petrushka noticed the ballerina watching him from her room. She danced towards him on the tips of her toes, as graceful and as delicate as a bird. Petrushka's heart pounded, and he tried desperately to dance beside her, but it was no good. He tripped over his feet and fell to the floor. The ballerina soon got bored with watching his clumsy efforts, so she danced away again along the stage. The Moor, in his dressing room, was practicing with his scimitar in front of a mirror. He strode manfully up and down and cut and slashed and lunged. But when the ballerina danced in, the Moor sprang to attention. He clapped merrily and stamped his feet as she glided towards him. Then they spun around together in a wild Eastern dance. Suddenly, Petrushka burst in. He'd been watching them from the stage, and he could not bear to see his beloved ballerina dancing with the Moor. "Take your hands off my princess!" he shouted, and he charged at the Moor, brandishing his cudgel. Outside the theatre, a crowd was gathering for the last show of the day. The golden domes threw long shadows across the square, but many people had stayed late to see the famous puppet show. The merchant was back again with his 2 gypsy girls, and there was even a performing bear with his trainer. They all gathered in a semicircle and waited patiently while the showman recited his speech. "Ladies and gentlemen, the puppets you will see today are unlike any you have ever seen. They will come alive before your..." But at that moment, the curtains burst open behind the showman's back. Petrushka leapt down from the stage and ran away full pelt across the square. Behind him rushed the Moor in a furious rage, waving the scimitar above his head. As the crowd turned in astonishment, Petrushka slipped and fell. Down came the scimitar in a great flashing arc, and Petrushka lay deadly still, face down in the snow. "They're alive!" shouted the merchant. "There's been a murder!" But the showman snatched up the Moor and Petrushka and shook and slapped them. A trail of sawdust trickled down from Petrushka's face. "There you are," he whined. "Just puppets. But there'll be no more shows today, ladies and gentlemen." As the crowd drifted away, the showman thrust the 2 puppets in through the back of the theatre and closed the tent. Then he walked off to a tavern, shaking his head gloomily. Later that night, he returned to the theatre. He drew back the curtain and peered inside. There was the ballerina, sleeping in her room. The Moor sat cross-legged on the stage, quietly polishing his scimitar. On the floor lay Petrushka, broken and torn. "What was that?" gasped the showman. Something was moving in the darkness above the theatre. He looked up and saw in the moonlight the ghost of Petrushka dancing in the air. It shook its fist and scowled at the showman. "You made me ugly," it snarled. "You made a fool of me. But now it's my turn. I'm free of the body you made for me. Now I can dance as well as anyone. Watch me. My love for the ballerina has made my spirit delicate and free. But my ugliness will haunt you for the rest of your days." And his laughter echoed in the frosty air.